Hey guys, thanks for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Glad to have you back. So, today we're going to talk about how to challenge or stretch or improve your logical or critical thinking skills. So, this is something I try to challenge myself on a regular basis. I feel like just naturally, I'm fairly left brained, fairly methodical in my thought process. Doesn't mean I can't be creative, but I'm generally much more left brained and solution oriented, problem solving oriented than I am creative. With that said, I've really challenged myself to think more creatively about things because it actually helps develop your logical and critical thinking skills. And we'll get into that a little bit in today's episode as we kind of talk through things. But when you think about how the world works, there's a lot of things, a lot of patterns that happen right in front of us that I think most of us are blind to. And I think using your logical or critical thinking skills can help all of us understand some of those patterns and habits and situations that are recurring and help us manage those more effectively, take advantage of those. If we're running a business, it helps us sell more stuff to people, helps us get new customers, helps us develop new products, helps us deliver new solutions to the marketplace. Those logical or critical thinking skills are terribly important. Plus, it's also a really good way when people are being emotional or less logical in their approach to a solution or a problem. You can kind of bring them back to center by using logical and analytical thoughts and facts and ideas. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's something I try to challenge myself on a lot. It's something I research a lot, try to think of different ways to get better at and keep improving. So I'm going to share some of my learnings, and hopefully they're useful to you. And I'd love to hear what you think about it as well. So when you're going through the episode, if you think about something, you want to make a comment or want to share one of your stories, by all means, feel free to do so. So the first one is actually to learn new skills. So when you think about how your brain is wired, you get into habits and routines and patterns. And one of the best ways to break those habits, routines, and patterns is to learn new skills. By learning new skills, you have to challenge the way you think about things. And typically, on those skills, there's some type of a method or a process or an initiation, whatever you want to call it, that allows you to get into and progress down a path on learning that new skill. It can be anything. Maybe you want to learn how to swim better. I can tell you I'm a terrible swimmer. I'm a really good athlete outside of water. You get me into water, and I'm bottom of the food chain. I'm lucky to get out of the water alive. My wife still makes fun of me for it because I was pretty good at everything else that I tried athletically, but swimming, not so much. But one of the things she watched me swim, and I watched her swim, and I said, "Hey, why do you keep your legs straight when you kick?" And she's like, "Are you serious?" Because she was on the swim team. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm serious. I always thought you kicked from the knee." And she's like, "No, you want to kick with your hips." Never knew. So there you learn something new, and that's an analytical way. When I think about it logically, that makes sense, but I've never been exposed to it. So I was just dog paddling around and side stroking around, and by learning new skills, you can really change the way you think, and it can help you in other aspects to think about things differently. There's lots of brain teasers and word problems and things like that. And I highly recommend those because it helps you think about things in a different way. Can you solve this riddle? Can you solve this puzzle? Take a look at this picture and tell me the six things that are different in the similar picture over here. All of those are great ways to go about changing the way you do things. But learning new skills, learn to crochet, learn to write, learn to whatever, fly a kite. All of those require logical thought process and kind of a methodical approach to learn how things go. Learn to fish. You ever been fishing before? Learn to fish. All sorts of different things that you can do to improve your logical and critical thinking skills because it makes your brain think about things differently, kind of rewires it, helps you rewire portions of it, and it really becomes useful on the logical and critical thinking skills. Two, ask questions. I cannot stress that enough. So many people accept so many things that they hear as fact or gospel, and there's really no good reason to accept them as fact or gospel. So a couple of examples on this. There's a great, I think it's a great film called Hot Coffee, and it's a documentary that in essence says you should question things that you hear versus accepting them as fact, because many times things are not the way that they're presented or the way they make it out into public. And the first portion of Hot Coffee dives deep into the woman who spilled hot coffee on herself and sued McDonald's for her injuries. So, I remember that being on Seinfeld. There was a joke about it, and Kramer wound up spilling coffee and went to Jackie Childs and wound up getting, I think he got Starbucks for life. And Jackie was all upset because he screwed over the class action case he was going to bring and all the money. But real world, that was a very interesting story when you dive deep into it. So, a couple of, I guess, several things when you think about that story. Most people think that the woman was driving her car when she spilled coffee on herself. That's false. She was in the passenger seat of the car. I think it was her nephew. It might have been her son, but I think it was her nephew that was driving. She was an elderly lady in her 70s when it happened. So she was not driving the car at all. She was in the passenger seat. Most people think the car was moving when the coffee was spilled on her. Also false. They went through the drive-through and pulled into a parking spot so she could put the cream and sugar into her coffee. So they were parked in the parking spot at McDonald's when the coffee spilled on her. So the lid of her coffee came off and spilled on her crotch. She had, excuse me, she had burns so bad it required skin grafts on the inside of her thighs, on her vagina. She was very badly injured by this coffee. She was not driving. She was not, the car wasn't even moving when it happened. Her family originally went to McDonald's and just wanted them to cover the hospital bills. They said, she got burned really badly on your coffee, and McDonald's refused to pay for her hospital bills. So that was when her family took action against McDonald's. McDonald's had received over 200 complaints about the temperature of their coffee. The same month that this happened to this woman, they had gotten over 200 complaints nationwide about the temperature of their coffee. I want to say it was like 180 degrees, whatever it was. I can tell you that like a hot water heater in your house is never supposed to be set more than 120 degrees because it can scald, burn kids, dogs, you, anybody. Like it's not supposed to be set over 120 degrees. It's dangerous to set it over that. The coffee was 180 degrees. They had reports of people burning the lining of their esophagus, the lining of their stomach, and McDonald's did nothing about it. People like coffee hot or keeping it hot. They just absolutely ignored the issue. And then I think the jury, I can't remember what it was. It was like $3 million or so. The jury awarded this woman, and then the judge reduced that. Shockingly, the judge reduced the amount. And the way that the jury came up with the penalty that McDonald's should pay for ignoring this problem and allowing this woman to get burned as badly as she did was they awarded her 2 days of coffee sales from McDonald's in the year that this happened. This was late 80s, early 90s. So whatever the jury award originally was, it got reduced by the judge, was 2 days of coffee sales. So I know everybody likes to joke, oh, how stupid are you? Coffee's hot, don't spill it on yourself. Elderly woman, the lid was not put on the coffee correctly, spilled in her lap. She was in the hospital for weeks, had skin grafts. She never recovered. She passed away 4 or 5 years later and never recovered to full health from this whole situation. So that's a good example of asking questions, especially about things you accept as fact. So I would encourage people to do the same thing on lots of things. We have several, it's election season, and we have several contentious issues that are out there. We're going to do a podcast just on abortion statistics and gun statistics because those are two fairly controversial topics, and we just want to get facts out. You can comment, and I know people are passionate and rightfully passionate about those things, but you should ask questions about things you accept as fact, because what you think is fact many times is not fact. And that's what a logical thinker or a critical thinker does, is they keep asking questions. Don't accept things that are presented to you. Ask people to prove it. So, studies say, which studies? Who's responsible for the studies? Who funded the studies? Who verified the studies? Those are the kinds of questions that you want to ask. We just came out of with the coronavirus issue. So many people just accepted at gospel everything that was said about the coronavirus, and it was wrong, and they knew it was wrong when they were saying it. Masking, no, didn't work nearly as effectively as people thought. There's debate about whether it worked at all, but it was, you're killing your grandmother if you don't wear a mask, and we were firing people. We were publicly shaming and humiliating people. The vaccine stops the spread of the virus. Totally false. Totally false. And anyone that's had a common cold, which is every single one of us, knows it's almost impossible to prevent common cold from transmitting from one person to another. But we stopped asking questions. We just started accepting things as gospel because we were afraid. A lot of people were afraid. So, you got to ask questions. One of the most important things about challenging your critical thinking skills. And don't get emotional. You don't have to be emotional or confrontational. Just ask the questions. If you ask questions and somebody else gets emotional, that's a pretty good sign that you're onto something, that they can't defend it, that they haven't thought critically about it, and you should question it more. You should dig deeper and go harder on that particular topic because you're onto something. People don't get emotional unless they're getting called out, and it feels personal to them. That's why they get emotional. Visualize outcomes and potential outcomes, like coronavirus. When the lockdowns were first presented, I said to my wife, what about all the kids that, like, they don't get food at home, they only get food at school? What do they do for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long this lasts? What if they get sent home to an abusive father? What if your spouse is abusive and now you're locked in the house with them for 2 weeks? And oh, by the way, we left all the liquor stores open. You can go buy alcohol, but you can't go to work. You can't provide for your family. You can't send your kids to school. How bad is that going to be for mental health down the road? And that bill's coming due right now. We're seeing that in lots of people, but nobody talked about what those outcomes were because everyone was afraid to question the narrative, question the official authority. And it's just wrong. You can't do it. It's the wrong way to go. You got to challenge your critical thinking skills, even when it's hard, even when you're a contrarian, even when it's unpopular. That's when it's most important to ask those questions. Be unemotional about it. Don't get all worked up about it. Stay calm, stay rational, but don't just accept things as facts that are not facts. Recognize patterns. Look for patterns in the world because lots of patterns exist. I was when I was negotiating stuff, I was talking to Unilever, and they had this big push on millennials being city dwellers for the rest of their lives. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And they said, well, yes, it is. We've got data that shows that's where they live. I said, sure. I said, how many kids do they have right now? And they said, on average, none. I said, of course, anyone that doesn't have a kid, a city is an attractive place to live. But when you start growing a family, having kids and growing a family, you want parks, you want schools, you want somewhere to have a pet, you want to be able to take a walk after dinner. Those aren't city activities, those are suburb activities. And it's not a mistake that there's all sorts of suburbs all across the country because everybody that has kids feels very strongly about those types of experiences. That's a pattern. It's a pattern that people were pushing out kids till later in life, but once they had kids, they would take many of the same actions that people before them took when they had kids, because it's a pattern. It's not rocket science. You know it's going to happen. You know what human nature is, and you've experienced those things. So look for those patterns because they'll help you predict what's going to happen in the future. Do word puzzles and brain exercises. I ran a group that was responsible for squeezing costs out of a supply chain. So we had to solve problems. We had to go to facilities, figure out what made the facilities operate less efficiently and then come up with solutions for those problems so that we could make the facilities operate more efficiently and save money, cut costs out of the system. So we did a lot of brain exercises. There was I found a riddle. It's called Einstein's riddle. I don't know if Einstein came up with it, but it's called Einstein's riddle. And it gives you, I think there was 5 people, there was 5 houses, and they all smoked cigarettes, and they all had a pet. And it gave you like 13 statements. And from those 13 statements, you had to determine which person smoked which cigarettes, which house they lived in, which pet they had. And if you logically laid it out and followed from one to the other, you could, through process of elimination, determine who smoked what. And I can't, I think they asked one question like, who lives in the White House? Or where does Fritz live? Or whatever the case may be. But there's all sorts of puzzles and exercises, especially now. There's apps out there that present those things to you. You can do a quick Google search and find brain exercises and word puzzles and critical thinking puzzles and those kind of things. And so you can practice it, practice analytical thinking. I've got a friend who asks a great question. What do we have to believe for this to be a logical outcome? If this is the base case, what do we have to believe for it to come true? That's a great way to think about things. Like, what are the variables that have to fall in place for this outcome to happen, to exist? And then you can question, how realistic is it that all of those variables happen the way you need them to happen for the particular outcome that you're looking for? So if you practice that, and he's a good thinker, if you practice those types of things, you're going to wind up in a much better spot in terms of thinking logically and critically. Learn from your mistakes. Can't stress that one enough. How many people do you know that wind up in the same situation over and over and over again? I don't feel real sorry for those people because they keep making the same choices that bring them back to the same spot they keep winding up in. Making new mistakes is good. You're always going to make mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, it means you're not trying. You're not pushing, because people that do things make mistakes. People that don't do things don't make mistakes, but they also don't live. I have no interest in being a person that sits around in a perfect world, but it never changes because I never try anything new. Not interesting to me at all. So you got to learn from your mistakes and truly go back and analyze what went wrong. When did it go wrong? How did it go wrong? How did I contribute to it going wrong? What could I do better to avoid this situation in the future? So if you're not doing that, if you're not doing a post-mortem and really truly asking yourself, what should I have done differently, or what could I have done differently? You're missing the boat. You're absolutely missing the boat. You're going to keep repeating those mistakes. It might be around managing your weight. It might be around your relationship with your spouse. It might be around the outcome you're getting in your career. There's lots of different things. If you keep winding up in the same spot, it's probably something you're doing. You're the common denominator. It's got to be something that you can identify and tweak or change. Anticipate the future. Try to figure out what's going to happen. Like, I know you can't predict the future, but you can anticipate certain outcomes. Like, if this happens, then this will be the outcome. If I take this action, this is the result I expect to happen from this action. That means you're critically thinking about things. Instead of shoot, ready, aim, it's ready, aim, shoot. So think about it and really think about what could happen. What do I expect to happen if this particular set of circumstances comes to fruition? And lastly, practice mindfulness. And I know that sounds a bit touchy-feely, but I'm a big fan of this. So pay deliberate attention to the moment that you're in. Do it on purpose. Intentionally focus on what's happening, and don't judge yourself. Don't judge the situation. Just try to understand it. Just try to really observe what is happening. And this was a big one for me when I was playing sports on a regular basis. So I was a pitcher, and when I got onto the rubber, the first thing I would do is I would take what I call a cleansing breath. So in through the nose, and it just resets your system. I would think about, is my jaw clenched? I want my jaw to be loose, because a lot of times when we get tense, we'll ball up our fists. We'll carry a lot of tension in our forearms, in our shoulders, in our necks, in our jaws. Are all those loose? Think about just making those muscles loose and relaxed. A deep cleansing breath is a great way to go. Is it hot? Is it cold? Are you tired? Are you hungry? Is the person you're with being annoying because they talk too much, or their voice is annoying, or they don't talk enough, or whatever the case may be? Truly try to assess the things that are happening in a moment, and it will help you kind of analyze what's going on in that moment and maybe help you understand a little better why you're thinking the way you're thinking or why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. So those are all tools that you can use to improve your logical or critical thinking skills. There's no silver bullet. There's no follow this process and you will be a better logical or critical thinker. It's no different than anything else. It's going to be incremental, small changes that you're able to make, or incremental, small nuances that you're able to incorporate into your process that will help you improve on those scenarios. So it's something I'm always challenging myself on. I wish I was better at it than I am. I feel like I'm okay at it, but I could get a lot better than I am. And so it's something that I try to keep front of mind because I find I get better outcomes in my life when I take a more logical and measured approach to the problems that I'm trying to solve. So hope you guys found this useful. Feel free to leave us a comment, share a story, share your tips. If you've got something that I didn't talk about that you feel strongly about, it'd be great for the rest of the community to be able to see what you're talking about as well. And also, don't forget to go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcasts are available on there. Our links to our social media is on there. And we've got a newsletter that you can sign up for on there as well if you just leave your email address with us. So thanks again for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk, guys. Appreciate you coming back and have a great day. We'll see you next time.